So we've got our guitar in tune, we've learned the chords, we know the speed of the piece. Now we've got to think about working on chord changing to play ourselves a chord progression. So a series of chords which will make up your song. I have got here a example chord progression that we're going to work to for the remainder of this course. And what the progression is going to be is G, D, E minor, and C. Okay, G, D, E minor, C. And what we're going to do is one measure of each of those chords, and my tempo for this is going to be 100 BPM. Okay, so we've got our chord progression in four measures of 4 chords, and that's going to give us 4 chord changes. We're going to have G to D, D to E minor to C, and C going back to G if this repeats, because this progression in the song is going to repeat and repeat. Okay, so stage 1 with chord changing that I do with my students is what I call here the chord change game. I got this idea from Justin Sanderco. You are a legend. He called it his 1 minute changes. I call it the chord change game. And what it is you have your chord change, so G to D. You set yourself a timer for 60 seconds, and in those 60 seconds you time how many times you can change between the chords. And the count would go 1, 2, oh, not quite, 3, 4, and you keep going, and you time 1 minute. You would do that with each chord pair. Okay, so that's 4 changes, that's about 5 to 6 minutes with a change around. And you'd want to do that every day, once a day, only once a day, do it once a day, and you want to note down your scores. Every time you do it, you write down your scores. And the idea is that day on day, you will do more and more chord changes as the fingers get to learn the movements from one chord to the next, up to a target of 60. So you would want to be doing 60 chord changes in 1 minute. Okay, so that's the chord change game. So phase 2, another possible exercise you can do that I do here with my students is the idea of chord changing with a beat. So whenever we work on a progression, we would normally strum the chords on beat 1 of each measure. Okay, so this exercise is working with a metronome, taking a chord change and checking, can you strum beat 1 on measure 1, play the chord, and then change in time for that next measure on the 1 beat with the new chord. So taking, for example, 100 BPMs, G to D, what we'd want to do is this, G, 2, 3, 4, D, back to G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, back and forth. And you want to do that to the target speed, the speed of the song, because then you're confident, you know that you can do that when it comes to putting the whole progression together. If you can't work at the BPM of the song, then you just take it slower, right? You take it down to 90 or 80 BPM, and you do the same exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, back and forth. And when you're happy at that speed, you take it faster until you're back at 100 BPM. So that's changing with a beat. Phase 3, which I like to do with students as soon as possible, is working out of their playing the idea of a 1, 2, 3 finger placement, kind of one by one. It's how we learn the chords. You go finger 1, then finger 2, then finger 3. Sometimes that stays with us. Taking an example of like a C chord. Sometimes when I see students come to a chord, they go right, up, finger 1, up, finger 2, finger 3. So when they're changing from one chord to the next, that happens in the fingers. So what I encourage them to do is to actually take out the first finger, the finger that they would place first. So in the case of a C chord, when you're working on a chord change, you would remove finger 1 to force you to basically work on these fingers 2 and 3. So taking the example in our progression, we have an E minor to a C, okay? You might see yourself doing this, so E minor, and then I go C, and then E minor, and then to the C, 1, 2, and 3. Try and do the C chord without finger 1, and just work on getting those fingers 2 and 3 in position. And then what you can do is start bringing in finger 1 back in, until the fingers start falling all in one go. That's the goal, that's what we want to do. And lastly, what is super helpful is what I call anchor fingers. And anchor fingers are when we have a finger on the board in a chord shape, which as we go to a chord change, it's actually in the same position, so it can stay where it is and kind of act as an anchor for the hand to form the new chord shape. So taking our progression, if we start out with a rock G, I have an anchor finger, finger number 3. That's in position where it wants to be for the D chord. So I can keep it there and then form the D chord around it. Now I've got no anchors to the E minor, so I go to E minor with my recommended fingers 1 and 2. And why that? Well, because there is an anchor finger, finger number 2, on string 4. I can keep that pressing down as I open up to the C chord, so that finger 2 was an anchor. Always be looking for anchor fingers as you do a chord progression. It might change in the recommended fingering from what the instructor has given you, but it can be a really useful tool to really speed up the chord changing, basically. Alright, so that's some ideas for developing and improving your chord changing. Now we're going to have a little talk about using a capo or capo.